This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. That's okay. Things are gonna be okay.
Now, I know this meme sounds like a crazy exaggeration. However, once you go through this insanely detailed guide for her, you'll have no doubts whatsoever regarding her kit, weapons, team corps, artifacts, constellations, and whatever else you can think of, along with her downsides. But if you still have any questions after this,
Oh God. Why?
then make sure to drop them down in the comments below and I'll respond to each and every one of you individually. And as always, I'll talk more practical stuff about this unit rather than just ideal theory scenario. With that being said, let's get right into it with a quick explanation of her kit. Starting off with her elemental skill, which makes her levitate for 5 seconds. And while she is in this state, she does anemo attacks periodically while also buffing swirl damage for the entire team. And the duration of this state can be increased to 10 seconds by swirling twice. She also gained an extra 100 EM for any pyro, cryo, hydro or electro attacks done by teammates while in this state. As for the burst, she deals a bigger anemo attack and starts creating snacks on field which, when picked up, either explode if HP is above 70% or heal if it's below 70%. However, if it's Mizuki herself picking up the snack, then she receives twice the healing other characters would. And finally, if the snack is not collected within 4 seconds of being created, then it will also explode. So far, it doesn't seem like there is anything wrong with her, right? Granted that swirl is not a reaction most people go to for damage, but other than that, she could work very well as a sucrose replacement, right? Right? You see, that's where the issue is. She cannot act as a sucrose replacement because of many reasons. The major one being the fact that she cannot even use normal attacks in this state. So, right off the bat, units like Yelan or Shingcho or even Fisher C6, which are reliant on the unit on field to be doing normal attacks, are straight up unusable with her. And on top of this, her swirl buff is only active when she is levitating on field, which makes no sense to me. But wait, you might be thinking that maybe she does a billion damage to warrant all of this field time. And well, you aren't exactly wrong in thinking that. Literally, anyone would think that. However, that's not what Hoyo seems to think. Hoyo instead has decided to shatter all expectations and give her an average DPS of 10,000. Yes, let that sink in. She'll be swirling max 10 to 11 times, and considering that's her only source of decent damage, you can't help but notice the damage loss. With all this being said, I would recommend leveling up her skill and burst only since her NAs are absolutely useless as she can't even do them while floating. So now that we understand her kit, let's talk about her weapon. And to no one's surprise, her signature is obviously the best overall since it provides a lot of EM, which in turn boosts her personal damage and the swirl buff she provides. But let's be honest, no one is pulling that. So when you do lose the 50-50 after 5.5 and decide to build her, use Even Star or Sacrificial Fragments on her since both give a lot of EM and both have some issues. Even Star's passive buffs teammates who scale off of attack. So use this weapon in teams where other units are based on attack. And as for Sacrificial Fragments, even though it provides more EM than Even Star, its passive is kinda useless for her because once you start floating, you'll keep flying for 10 seconds until you manually decide to end her levitation, either by pressing the skill button again or by switching to another character. So assuming you are using the full 10 seconds, that leaves you with only a 5-second cooldown, and those 5 seconds will be used to switch to other characters and use their abilities, rendering this passive useless. Her other potential weapons are displayed on screen with some extra info about them. Moving on to her artifacts, VV is her best option since you get swirl damage boost plus elemental red shred. I mean, what else do you need? However, if you don't want to use VV, then put the gilded set on her since it will provide an attack buff to other anemo units in team and 50 EM boost to non-anemo units. As for the stats, go for triple EM on her if you can get to 180 ER. If not, then go ER and double EM as that will help in reaching 180 ER. And of course, focus on getting ER and EM in substats wherever possible. Do note that if you aren't interested in bursting with her every rotation, then an ER of 130 to 140 also works. Now let's talk about her team. And primarily, you'll be running her in either Electro Charge comms or Aggravate comms. with units who can do off-field damage without the need for the active character to be doing normal attacks. Cause like I said before, she can't do normal attacks while levitating. So units like Xingqiu, Yelan or Official C6 won't work with her. Having said that, her best team is literally any Electro Charge team with Furina. Just mix and match Electro and Hydro units with Furina and Mizuki to get a perfect team. However, in practical scenarios, which is the reason you subscribe to this channel for, my recommendation would be to use Cookie with Fischl or Oreo, since Mizuki's heals alone aren't really enough, especially in Abyss where multiple enemies might attack you at once. Her heals are also reliant on collecting the snacks instead of directly healing, which further adds to the problem. Also, with Furina's HP drain, other units in the team will be on constant life support within one shot range, which is why having another healer works in the team's favor. Now, if you are one of the god gamers who can dodge everything, then obviously this doesn't apply to you. So you can replace Cookie with Kazuha, Venti or Sucrose so that someone in the team is at least using the swirl burst she provides. Granted that their burst will end before Mizuki's buff duration of 10 seconds is over, but hey, it's still something, right? Now, my recommendation would be to use her in Electro Charge comps only. However, you can also use her in Aggravate or Hyper Bloom Taser comps, but those have some issues within themselves, particularly with Dendro. You see, in those teams, the Dendro application will take over once Electro attacks stop. And what do I mean by that? Well, since the duration of her skill is 10 seconds, there is a good chance that Electro attacks from supporting teammates will stop before she is done floating around. And when they stop, Dendro will take over as the primary element on the enemy, rendering Mizuki unable to swirl. So for a significant duration of those 10 seconds, you won't be swirling at all, further decreasing her DPS. And finally, we have the Burning comp, which, let's be honest, is just Scopium Ultra Pro Max. And don't get me wrong, I don't say that because of the team damage, but because of the fact that she requires triple Archons in her team to be viable. Now, so far the teams I mentioned are the ones where Mizuki is on-field levitating and swirling. However, you can choose not to play her like that and instead use her as a VV enabler. So essentially, all you'll be doing is switching to Mizuki after applying the element you want to swirl. For example, in Mizuki Mauvika teams, you probably want to swirl Pyro. So you use Mauvika's skill, switch to Mizuki and use either one normal attack or her burst to enable VV, and that's it. However, if this playstyle also doesn't suit you, then just use her as a Sucrose replacement by normal attacking with her and not using her skill at all. Do note that this playstyle is obviously suboptimal, as you'd be better off using literally any other character. But hey, on the plus side, since you are normal attacking, you can use Yelan, Xingqiu and Official C6 with her. So now that we are done with the team comps, let's discuss Constellations briefly, cause we'll all be getting them anyway after losing 50-50s to her constantly. So starting off with her C1, which increases her swirl damage every 3.5 seconds for one hit. So realistically, every 5th hit she does while levitating will be buffed. As for her C2, she buffs Pyro, Cryo, Hydro and Electro damage of everyone in the team by 0.04% of her EM. However, this only takes effect, well, you guessed it, when she is levitating and ends when she is not. C3 is just extra levels to skill. C4 is kinda important as it enables her snack to heal and explode at the same time while also providing extra energy for her, effectively increasing her damage output and survivability but decreasing her ER requirements. C5 is extra levels to burst and C6 just enables swirls to crit while she is floating around. Now, I'd say that her Constellation breakpoints are C2, C4 and C6. C1 is not that great in my opinion, because a total of 3 or 4 swirl hits will have their damage increased, which is nothing crazy. But C2, C4 and C6 are solid investments for her. So now that we understand everything about her, let's talk about the issues which make her Mizuki. Starting off with her own personal damage, which is not that great. Like I said before, 11 swirls averaging around 10k total DPS is not viable at all, especially considering she requires being on field. In fact, her best team damage wise is one where she literally just does one normal attack to activate VV and that's it. All of her other teams do less damage than this team, which is quite sad, I'm not gonna lie. If however she was buffing swirl off field, then her damage output wouldn't really matter as much. And speaking of buffing, the issue with her buff is that at the moment it's nothing crazy. You see, swirl by itself is a pretty weak reaction damage wise, so buffing it slightly or even decently won't do much for it. And not to mention, all MMO units who can trigger swirl off field like Venti or Kazuha can't fully make use of her buffs, since their bursts typically end before her buff duration of 10 seconds is over. So she essentially requires a unit whose main source of damage is swirl and who can consistently trigger it off field for at least 10 seconds. But unfortunately, no such unit currently exists in game. And you know what? I bet that they'll release a unit who's perfect for her before Natlan ends.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory.
Anyway, coming back to Mizuki, there's a major adjustment curve you'll need to go through for her, cause in her levitation state, she cannot perform normal attacks or even jump for that matter, which can feel restrictive and take some time to adapt to, especially if you're someone who just spams mouse clicks. Another issue with her is that sometimes you won't be able to switch to another unit, cause she is levitating slightly higher than the acceptable range for switching. Let me explain why this happens. So, you know how with Chaska you can climb a vertical surface if it's tilted? The same thing happens here. Some enemies have tilted or uneven hitboxes. So while Mizuki is levitating, she'll sometimes be pushed up slightly due to her colliding with the enemy's hitbox, and therefore you won't be able to switch. Another significant issue with her is the fact that her snacks are barely visible in teams where there are a bunch of animations going on, which, let's be honest, is literally every team in Abyss. The main culprit here is Kazuha, since his burst has a crazy animation which lasts for a while, making it harder to spot the snacks. And speaking of teams, one of her best teammates, Furina, presents another issue. Since Furina drains HP and Mizuki requires being on field, the other units in the team are constantly on life support within one shot range, which makes those teams very squishy, especially in Abyss. Now, I know that this is not her final version, but honestly, after the way they have turned out to be, I don't really have any hope. Anyway, now that we are done with all the negatives, let's talk about her one and only positive. Since she levitates and attacks from a distance, you can literally fly around with her, dodging attacks easily, and since you aren't spamming mouse clicks, that's extra lifespan for your mouse. But hey, as a wise man once said, enemies can't kill you if they are already dead, which is a metaphor for use literally any other team. Now, I know that she's gonna be a standard banner unit, but I don't think we should accept a 5-star, which is a benchmark for the new lowest. If she was a 4-star, I wouldn't really have an issue with her. But as it stands, she's a 5-star who is worse than 4 stars in game. So with all this being said, the only thing left to say is congrats on losing the 50-50 and getting Mizuki.